You are such a disgusting little toad. A disgusting, grimy, slimy little toad. Now put on those. Faster! So pathetic. Ugh. As usual. I bet you're the world's lousiest attorney. Well, session's over.
In this scene, the confrontation between Skin and London becomes a deeply layered moment that reveals how queer women often navigate the fraught terrain between care, accountability, community responsibility, and the longing to be understood, and what makes the interaction so powerful when viewed through a queer and emotionally grounded lens is that it strips away any veneer of professional neutrality and instead exposes the raw truth of two women who have been taught in different ways to guard themselves, to fight for credibility, and to survive in a world that still scrutinizes queer intimacy and queer labor more harshly than it scrutinizes anyone else's. Because the surface conflict, one woman calling out another for unsafe behavior, is only the entry point into a much older emotional story about how women carry pain, how they lash out when they feel unseen, and how they try, even imperfectly, to protect one another within marginalized spaces. Skin, arriving in defensive righteousness, believes she's acting out of principle, and in some ways she saw harm, or the possibility of harm. And she acted decisively because queer communities, especially those in fringe professions or subcultures, often build their survival on internal accountability, rather than on faith that the outside world will treat them fairly. Yet even in her conviction, we glimpse the quieter emotions beneath. Fear of failing others, fear of becoming complicit, fear of what harm from within can mean for an already vulnerable community. And that fear can resonate deeply with queer viewers who know that sometimes calling someone out feels like calling out a sister, someone who shares your struggle. And the weight of that responsibility can stick to you long after the moment has passed, especially because queer women often feel doubly responsible, both to protect individuals within their community and to protect the community itself from the damaging narratives the outside world is always eager to impose. London, on the other hand, enters the scene full of fury, but that fury is grief in disguise, grief laced with humiliation, grief shaped by the terror of losing not only income but identity. Because for many queer women, especially those working in spaces already stigmatized by society, the work is not just work. It is survival, autonomy, chosen identity, a structure of meaning, a place where they get to define their own power rather than having it defined for them. And when she says she has lost almost everything, it becomes a confession about the fragility of stability when you live at the edge of cultural acceptance. The emotional collision between them becomes a kind of reluctant intimacy, Skin letting her stern facade crack long enough to feel compassion, London letting her anger soften long enough to admit pain. And through those shifts we see how queer relationships, in friendship, in mentorship, in chosen family, often form not through ease but through conflict that forces emotional honesty into the room. Because queer women are often drawn to each other, not only by shared identity, but by a shared understanding of how hard it can be to simply continue when the world keeps asking more of you than it asks of others. Queer viewers may find themselves reflected in the tension between wanting to do what is right for the community and wanting to preserve connection with another queer woman who is struggling, because queer life is full of moments when you must decide whether to protect someone even when it hurts them. And that decision never comes without guilt or longing, especially for women who have been conditioned to be emotional caretakers even when they are the ones in pain. Women of all identities may relate to how quickly the conversation slides toward apology, care, and responsibility, because women are trained to clean up emotional messes even when they did not create them, to downplay their own pain in favor of someone else's stability. And we see Skin doing exactly this when she immediately offers to retract her blog post, to repair London's reputation, to help her find new clients, even though she was originally acting out of genuine concern and professional ethics, illustrating how women often feel obligated to manage the emotional fallout of taking necessary action. London's vulnerability, her confession about her father's death, her admission that she was using work to distract herself from grief, speaks to the way women are expected to swallow their personal heartbreak and continue functioning, often until they break, and queer women in particular may see themselves in her attempt to maintain control until something shatters. Because when your identity is already marginalized, you fear that any sign of struggle will be used against you. When Skin says she had no idea, it becomes an indictment of how often queer women mask their suffering to avoid being perceived as unstable, dramatic, or incapable in professional or community spaces. Especially because queer women know that the world is quick to conflate emotional expression with incompetence. The scene challenges societal discomfort with women's emotional closeness by allowing these two queer women to be angry, hurt, afraid, and tender with one another without eroticizing it, instead of being portrayed as rivals or seductresses. They are shown as flawed, complex adults whose connection is forged through mutual recognition of pain and responsibility. And this tenderness with intention is something queer women know intimately because they have often had to build solidarity in environments that were never built to support them. It is unsettling to some audiences because genuine emotional intimacy between women, even when it's not romantic or sexual, has historically been dismissed, minimized, or fetishized, but this scene treats it as something real and meaningful, something that can exist without needing to be palatable to male or mainstream expectations. It also mirrors the broader pressures queer women face to self-police, to justify their decisions, to anticipate the reactions of others, and to manage crises gracefully even when no one is managing theirs, which can lead to internalized expectations that they must always be the good queer, ethical, perfect, unproblematic, responsible for everyone's safety and comfort, as we see in Skin's initial defensive certainty and later self-doubt. London embodies the opposite wound, the fear that one mistake defines you forever, that being imperfect means being discarded, that grief or emotional volatility makes you unlovable or unemployable. Fears that resonate profoundly with women who have been raised to believe that their worth is conditional and must be earned through constant calmness, competence, and emotional restraint. The moment when Skin offers practical help, not out of obligation but out of care, and London acknowledges her own missteps, becomes an act of queer visibility. Not the loud, symbolic kind, but the intimate kind where two women allow themselves to be seen in all their imperfections and still choose connection instead of retreat. And that choice reflects a truth about queer life that rarely gets depicted with respect, that queer women build communities not through perfection but through repair. The scene suggests that love between queer women, whether platonic, professional, or something unnamed, is often complicated, fraught and shaped by external pressures, yet beautiful because it is grounded in shared struggle and mutual recognition. And this kind of emotional truth-telling is a form of queer agency that challenges the stereotypes that portray queer women as either hypersexualized or emotionally chaotic, instead painting them as emotionally literate, self-reflective, and capable of profound connection. It tells queer women watching that their emotional depth is not strange, that their protectiveness is not overreaction, that their grief is not weakness, and that their longing to be understood by another woman, whether or not it is romantic, is a valid and profound human desire, one that deserves representation. In the end, the scene is about two queer women stepping, however clumsily, toward visibility with each other, one acknowledging that she acted out of fear and responsibility, the other admitting that pain drove her to a breaking point, and both recognizing that authentic connection can begin in the ruins of conflict, creating a space where healing is possible, not because everything is fixed, but because for once, neither of them is hiding.